Welcome to LiveDaf, your online Daf Yomi Shir.
Shalom Aleichem and welcome back to today's Daf Yomi, a brand new Masechta, Menachos Menachos. So we're on Daf Beis at the Mishnah Kol Menachos. Now, unlike Masechtas Zvachim, which discusses primarily animal or bird karbanos, our Masechta will discuss Menachos. A mincha is comprised of flour, most times mixed with oil, and it undergoes a process which parallels the avodos of a carbon, of an animal carbon. So just like over there we have the shchita, followed by the kabbalah, the receiving of the blood, then walking into the mizbeach, the halach, and then applying it on the mizbeach. By a mincha, we have 4 steps, 4 phases of the hakrava, of the offering, which correspond to those aforementioned steps, but a little different, of course. So we begin with a kmitza. So the kohen scoops a scoop of that dough out, and that's like the shchita. He separates, just like by the shchita you separate the blood from the mizbeach, you separate this scoop of material, which is intended for the mizbeach, followed by placing it into a kli, that's like the kabbalah, receiving it in a kli sharis, a holy vessel. Then you walk into the mizbeach, that's halach, and then you burn it on the mizbeach, that's the aktorah. So the 4 phases, the 4 steps of the akrava of a mincha, parallel the 4 steps of akrava by a carbon. And the halachas are very similar. Just like by a animal carbon, we need lishma, the kohen has to be focused, having in mind the right mincha, the right owner. Same by a mincha. Says the Mishnah, what if he has something else in mind? He's doing, one type of mincha. There are different types, right? You have a mincha with oil, without oil. That's a minchas chayte, a sinner's mincha, comes without oil, which he brings to atone for a sin, just like a person would bring a chatas, an animal chatas for a kapara. If you can't afford an animal, you bring a mincha. So he's doing one type of mincha, scooping, and he's claiming, he's verbalizing it, of course. He's claiming that this is a different mincha, different type, or a different owner owns it. That's called shalei lishma, the wrong intention. What happens then? Well, it's very similar to what happens to the animal karbanis in Masechtas Zvachim. Kol menachos shenikmat shalei lishma, a mincha that was nikmat, that was scooped, the wrong thing in mind. Rashi says, for instance, there's a menachos marcheshes here, a deep fried mincha. The kohen is engaging in the kmitza. As he's doing, he's saying, I'm doing it l'shem machvas, as though it's a machvas. It's a mincha that was shallow fried. Kol menachos shenikmat shalei lishma. What happened? Ksheira, the mincha ultimately is kosher, which means to say you continue the process and the leftovers are given to the kohanim for consumption. So, for all practical purposes, the mincha itself is okay, but the owner loses it. The owner has not fulfilled his obligation. He must bring another one instead. Ela shalei oda labalam l'shem chayva. So that's in general. The mincha is okay, but the owner has to redo it. We have 2 exceptions to the rule. Where over there, the mincha itself is a failed mincha, chutz minchas chayte, except by a mincha of a sinner, or minchas kenois, the mincha that a soita would bring, an errant woman. In those 2 cases, even a slight deviation, like having the wrong intention, invalidates the mincha. And the Mishnah continues and explains, minchas chayte, minchas kenois, shakam tzan shalei lishman. So either the kmitza was done shalei lishman, he's doing it on a chayte, and he's saying, this is a regular mincha, or the same regarding the other steps of the avodah, nasan b'kli, or when he places the kmitza in the kli, he had the wrong intention. V'halach, or when he walked into the mizbeach, he had the wrong intention. V'hikter, or when he burnt it, it was shlei lishman, or a mix of both. During the kmitza, he shifted from proper thoughts to improper thoughts. Oy lishman, properly, and then he shifted v'shlei lishman, or the other way. Or shlei lishman, he started with incorrect thoughts. V'lishman, and shifted to the proper intention. In all these cases, the mincha is psulos. What's an example of shifting? Ketad lishman v'shlei lishman. How do you go from good to bad? L'shem minchas chayte. So he was doing the kmitza on the minchas chayte with the proper intention, but then he shifted. He got distracted. L'shem minchas chayte, and he's thinking, okay, this is a minchas nedava. L'shem minchas nedava, it's a donated mincha, regular mincha with oil. And the same in the reverse. Shalei lishman v'lishman can mean l'shem minchas nedava. When he did the kmitza, he's saying, this is a minchas nedava, regular mincha, and then he catches himself l'shem minchas chayte, And it goes back to the correct thought of Minchas Chayte. In all these cases, since there's an element of Shlei Lishma, by the Minchas Chayte, Minchas Knois is totally possible. But in a regular case, ordinarily, the Mincha is okay. However, the owner has to redo it. Now, why does the Mishnah have to say the word Ella in the first line, the opening statement? All Menachos, Shlei Lishman Aksheres. It could have simply said they're kosher, but the owner has to redo it. Why the word Ella? Ella sounds like this is the only thing wrong with it. They have to redo it. But it in itself is okay. What are we trying to stress here? What are we highlighting here? Listen, he could have simply said, a mincha Shlei Lishma is kosher, and the owner has to redo it. Why the word Ella? The Mishnah is stressing to us that other than this point that has to be redone, other than the owner not getting credit for it, the mincha itself per se is 100% okay. Which means to say, you have to refocus and have correct thoughts going forward. You can't say, well, once I'm off, I'm off. The owner has not fulfilled his obligation, has to redo it. But the mincha gufa, the actual mincha itself, is 100% okay. Regarding what? Pertaining to what? You can't continue deviating. Just because you deviated at the first point, you have to get back on track and think the right thoughts and focus on what you're doing. Because the Rav, as Rav explains to us, I'm a Rav. He's talking about an animal carving, an oila, sheshachta Shlei Lishma, but the shchita was Shlei Lishma. Don't think, okay, once I'm off track, it's gone. Pafalim. No, ahasur lizroik dama Shlei Lishma. When you get to the next point of zrika, you have to do it correctly. Why? Iba yisei masvara, it could be simple logic. Iba yisei makro, based on a pasuk. Iba yisei masvara, it can be simple logic. Just because you deviated once, that doesn't justify. It's not a license to continue doing so. Just because he was mishana, he deviated once in the shchita, kol hani l'shana of an ezel, should continue doing so throughout the rest of the process? Of course not. It could be based on a pasuk. It doesn't allow it. The pasuk says like this: fulfill your verbal commitments, bring your karbanos as you promised, as you personally promised. Now we know that another means a personal promise. It's a vow. I will bring an oil, and he has to see it through till the end. If something goes wrong, he has to redo it. But then the pasuk switches to a different label, nedava. Nedava is a different type of commitment. It's more of a donation, an itemized donation. This thing is a nedava. If something goes wrong, I'm not responsible. Nedava, why are we calling it nedava? Nederu. You just told me a minute ago it's a neder. Why are you switching to nedava? Curly neder, curly nedava. Nedava, how can you call the same thing both? Ella. The pasuk teaching goes as follows: if you have actually carried through what you had promised, meaning you processed the carbon properly, lishma, great, yehi neder. It counts for his sake, it gets credited for it, he has fulfilled his obligation, he goes home. But otherwise, if he deviated, the carbon is still okay. Yehi neder, but it's considered like a donation. But you have to redo your obligation and rebring a carbon. But after all, the Torah still calls it an nedava. Nedava means it has value. It's a valid carbon on account of the carbon per se. Just because it's a nedava, does that allow you to deviate? Of course not. And that's what the Mishnah is highlighting. Just because the first act was done incorrectly doesn't give him a green light to continue doing so. Get back on track. Okay, now the Mishnah speaks about a mincha that was done Shlei Lishma. That runs him into problems. The mincha is kosher, but he has to redo it. In some cases, like a minchas chayte, it's completely puzzled. Lema, perhaps we can say Masnis in our Mishnah, the Loik Reb Shimon, is not consistent with Reb Shimon's Shita, who says there's no issue about having incorrect intentions by a mincha, because everybody sees it. It's plainly evident. Look, he's processing a minchas marcheshes, an oily, deep-fried mincha, and he's claiming it's a dry mincha. It's a machmas. He's processing a minchas chayte that's without oil, and he's proclaiming it to be a regular mincha with oil. It's nonsense. His actions override his intentions. His actions speak louder, and therefore you could just ignore it, and it will not affect the mincha whatsoever. Our Mishnah disagrees, apparently. Our Mishnah knows that Shlei Lishma can apply even to a mincha. Ulei Masnisin look at Reb Shimon. It's not Reb Shimon. Kol Menachos shenikim to Shloi Lishma. Ksheres. A Mencha that was not Shloi Lishma is okay, perfectly fine. V'odol L'Baal M'Shem Chayven. The owner gets credited for it. You know why? It's different than animals. Who can tell the difference between an Oila and a Shlamim and a Chat? It's very hard to tell them apart, if at all. So in that case, deviation has to be reckoned with. He's doing an Oila and he's claiming it's a Chatas, it takes effect. But here it's different. Sheina Menachos Daimus L'Zvachim. Menachos is very different than Zvachim. Sha'akayim it's Machvas. He's doing Kmitz on a Machvas type of Mincha, which is plainly clear, and he's claiming L'Shum Archeshes, I'm doing a Marcheshes. What are you talking about? Ma'aseh Mechichan Alea L'Shum Machvas. Everybody sees the actions that are being done are the clearest indication that it's a Machvas. Another example would be Charev L'Shum Blula. He takes a dry minchas chayte without oil, and he's claiming it's a blula, it's mixed with oil. It's plain as day. Maaseh machichan aleh, the activity is done with this mincha. His own actions contradict his intention. L'shem charev, it's clear that it's a chareva. Hence, it could be ignored, and it does not affect the mincha. As opposed to animal karbonos, where his deviation isn't so blatant. Aval bezvachim einakein, because the shchita is all the same, whether it's an oila or it's a chat. Who's going to know? Shchita achas lekulan, uzrik achas lekulan, v'kabal achas lekulan, right? So that's so that our Mishnah that reckons with Shloi Lishma by a mincha is different than Reb Shimon? Is this agreeing with Reb Shimon? Perhaps. However, soon coming up in the Gemara, we're going to have a contradiction in Reb Shimon, and we're going to have 3 ways to explain Reb Shimon. So let's go through them sort of briefly and see perhaps if they can provide a solution. Because they're going to sort of frame Reb Shimon's opinion. Hanichel Ravashi. So according to Ravashi, it might work. The Amar who says, Kan b'kaimetz machvas l'shom machvas, marcheshes, kan b'kaimetz minchas machvas, l'shom minchas marcheshes. So Hanichel Ravashi, according to Ravashi, certainly it's going to work out. Because he says, when does Reb Shimon say that we ignore his deviation? That's when he's doing machmas l'shem marcheshes. He's saying, look, this is I'm doing marcheshes. Clearly incorrect, so we just ignore it. But if he spells out the word mincha, he says, I'm doing a minchas marcheshes. That's very different, and that would adversely affect the mincha, even according to Reb Shimon, as we're going to see later. Okay, that's the fact. So according to this opinion, according to this perspective, we can easily answer our question. We can reconcile our Mishnah with Reb Shimon as well, because even he would agree. Since our Mishnah could be speaking, mincha l'shem mincha. Right? The Mishnah clearly says that he was thinking this mincha versus that mincha. So once he referenced the idea of mincha, Shloi Lishma would be effective even according to Reb Shimon. Okay, so that would answer our question. Okay, so according to Rav Ashi, we have a solution. All that Reb Shimon says, deviation by a mincha is to be ignored, but not when he spells out the word mincha, which is the case of our Mishnah. Ella, however, according to the other ways to understand Reb Shimon, l'Rabba, v'Rava, according to their perspective in Reb Shimon, this solution would not work. Michael Lememar, now we're stuck again. Why? Perhaps you can still insist and say, well, could come Shani Rabba. Rabba, likewise, gives context to Reb Shimon, and he says like this: it depends what he deviated. If he switched the type of mincha, we ignore that because he's clearly, faking. Well, if he switched owners, he was working on Reuben's mincha and he's claiming that it's Shimon's, that would affect the mincha because that's not plainly, evident, right? So according to this, can we reconcile our Mishnah with Reb Shimon? No, because our Mishnah is speaking about switching the type of mincha. Our Mishnah doesn't relate to owners. And again, if we're speaking about type of mincha, that's plainly evident. And that wouldn't be reckoned with. But our Mishnah, the case of our Mishnah is Shinei Kodesh, where he's switching the type of mincha. Diktani, look at the Mishnah. Look at the example in the Mishnah. Case at Lishman Shlo Lishman. What's considered Lishman Shlo Lishman? L'shem Menachos Choite, L'shem Menachos Nedava, right? So if it's referencing the type of mincha, according to Reb Shimon, that's to be ignored. So our Mishnah, which reckons with it, is not going like Reb Shimon. Veinami. Furthermore, let's go with Rabba's approach, which is the third approach in Reb Shimon. He says, look, when does Reb Shimon say that we ignore? Become its mincha l'shem mincha. When he's doing one mincha for the sake of the other mincha, we ignore it. But when does even Reb Shimon reckon with Shlei l'shma by mincha? Become its mincha l'shem zebach. When he's doing the kmitza on a mincha and he says, I'm having an oila in mind. Now, that would be considered a problem even according to Reb Shimon. Can that work with our Mishnah? No, because our Mishnah is speaking about switching minchas. Hamas nisin mincha l'shem mincha. Our Mishnah is speaking about relabeling minchas. Having one mincha, doing one mincha and having the other mincha in mind, which again, according to Reb Shimon, we ignore. The Tanya Mishnah's case is as follows. Shloi l'shman l'shman, what's that example? L'shem minchas nedava, l'shem minchas choite. So this wouldn't work according to Reb Shimon. According to him, we ignore this type of deviation, which is plainly false. Elo, you're right, l'rabba, according to Rabba and Rabba, which is the most recent explanations of Reb Shimon, Machvarta, it's clear that Masnis and Al Mishnah, which reckons with a switch and a mincha like Reb Shimon, is not like Reb Shimon. According to him, we just ignore it. Okay, now here comes the contradiction that we were talking about, on which we have Rav Ashi and Rabba who come to explain. Virami, we have an apparent stira, contradiction, the Reb Shimon between two Reb Shimons. Because our earlier reference in Reb Shimon said that unlike animal karbanis where we can't tell them apart and we have to reckon with his deviations and thoughts, by mincha it's plainly evident, we just ignore it. Here comes a brisa where it seems that Reb Shimon does take into account his intentions, even by a mincha, the sanya. Reb Shimon Omer, Kodesh Kedashim, this is a pasuk which describes a mincha and calls it Kodesh Kedashim hi. Kechatas v'ka'asham compares it to chatas v'asham. What's the point of comparing a mincha to chatas v'asham? To tell us every mincha, some minchas, right? In the mincha family, let's put it that way. In the mincha family, we have some that are comparable to a chatas, a sinner's minchas like a chatas. In which case, if it's shlei l'shma, it's completely possible like a chatas. And some are like an asham, like a regular carbon. In which case, even shlei l'shma would still pass. Yesh mem kechatas, yesh mem kechat, yesh mem kasham. Meaning, minchas choite, a mincha of a sinner is comparable to a chatas, harei kechatas, and therefore, just like by a chatas, when it was processed shlei l'shma, it's completely invalid. Lefichach kamta shlei l'shma psul. Likewise, the kmitza of this mincha shlei l'shma is possible kechatas. Whereas a minchas and a donated mincha, harei keasham, has a status like an asham. And therefore, lefichach comes to shlei l'shma is kshera. Kmitza shlei l'shma is kasha. And furthermore, asham, we compare it to asham all the way. Ma asham kasha ve'enim ratzah. Just like an asham shlei l'shma, although the animal itself, the carbon is technically kasha, but it doesn't count. For the sake of its owner, he has to bring another one. Af minchas nedava. Likewise, a regular mincha, donated mincha, shlei l'shma is kshera ve'enim ratzah. It doesn't count. He has to redo it. So clearly, Reb Shimon is reckoning with deviant thoughts by a mincha as well. In contrast to the earlier Reb Shimon, who says, no, just ignore what he's thinking, ignore what he's saying. By the way, Rashi points out that when we speak about machshava and karbanis and menachos, shlei l'shma, etc., they all have to be verbalized, announced. Okay? So what do we do with this apparent contradiction? Here come the three answers that we briefly mentioned before. We have Rabba, right? Well, let's see. Amar Rabba lekasha. Here's an answer. Depends. What is deviation referred to? Kam b'shinu kodesh. If it pertains to the type of mincha, it's nonsense, because it's plainly evident that he's falsifying. Kam b'shinu bailam. But if he's falsifying the owner, that's not plainly evident that you have to reckon with. Amali Abai responds like this. He says, how can you differentiate between shinu kodesh and shinu bailam? After all, how do we know that there's even a problem with shlei l'shma by mincha? We just quoted the pasuk. We compare it to the animal karbanis. Well, if you can compare it, you have to compare it all the way. And just like shini bailam adversely affected, same thing with shini kodesh. You can't differentiate. Let's take an analysis. Let's see what's going on. Machshava de pas rachman hakeshi. How do we know that machshava incorrect thoughts by a mincha are problematic. Hekeshi, it's by way of comparing it to animal karbanis, as we just learned. You can't differentiate. It's one package. Once you're importing, you have to import the entire package. Mali shini kodesh, mali shini baylam. What difference if it's shini kodesh or shini baylam? Amar Leis Rabbi says, hold it. Big difference. Maaseh moichich. Remember Reb Shimon said that we don't reckon with incorrect thoughts by mincha because maaseh moichich. Its activities are indicative, which means to say the actions speak greater than words. He's blatantly falsifying. We see what's going on. So that reference, that phrase, the Reb Shimon says, Svarahi. It's a svara, it's logic. The Reb Shimon does time in the crowd, because generally we find that Reb Shimon taps into logic when it comes to explaining psukim and mitzvahs. So therefore he discounts this type of deviation. We don't reckon with it, because it's clearly, right, a non-starter. Machshava de loy minkra pasal rachmana. Machshava de minkra loy pasal rachmana. So that explains the difference between this type of deviation and that type. A machshava de loy minkra, an erroneous, incorrect thought, which is not plainly evident, like regarding ownership, nobody knows who. You have to reckon with it. It invalidates the mincha. Machshava de minkra, but something which is plainly evident, like falsifying the type of mincha, it's a non-starter. Like Pasal Rachman, Torah doesn't reckon with that. So that explains Reb Shimon. Says the Gemara, okay, so are you telling me that when a Shaloi Lishma is contradicted by the facts on the ground, we don't have to take it into account? And that explains Reb Shimon's ignoring the Shaloi Lishma by the Mincha. So likewise, if you can come up with similar scenarios by bird karbanis or animal karbanis, where the Shaloi Lishma is contradicted by the facts on the ground, perhaps you can ignore it as well, no reckon with the Shaloi Lishma, the animal's perfectly kosher, really? Let's go through various cases. If that's the case, Oila Soif. A bird oila, shemalka lamala, shemchata soif. He did the malika, which means the removal of the head of the animal from the back. He did it on the upper part of the mizbeach, on the top of the mizbeach, which is not really where you do a chatas. That's where you do the oila. Mishum chata soif, and he's claiming it's a chata soif. Tiratza, tirtza. The animal should be perfectly fine. The bird should be perfectly acceptable, perfectly valid, perfectly kosher. Ignore his deviant thoughts. Why? Because his actions are indicative of an oila. Everybody sees this an oila. Why? Because if it were to be a chata soif as he's claiming, you would do it downstairs. So why do we reckon with the Shaloi Lishma in that case? Answers the Gemara, you're right to a certain extent. Ideally, right? Primarily this is an oif location, but you could do a chatas up here as well, so you'll never know. Maybe it really is a chatas oif. So again, it's not contradicted by the facts on the ground. Atu, do you mean to say chatas oif l'malam milasa? You can't do a chatas oif upstairs? Hamamar, we learned back in Zvachim Malika b'chal makom b'mizbeach ksher. Technically, you could do Malika even on chatas oif anywhere in the mizbeach. So since it's not clear, you have to take into account is Shaloi Lishma. Next question: what about an oila oif? Shemitza dam l'malam. Now, in contrast to the chatas, whose blood goes through two processes, two stages. First you do the hazah, you'll grab the bird and you swing it to the mizbeach and you spray, and then you squeeze near the mizbeach. That's hazah and mitzvah. By the oil, you only do mitzvah, only squeeze it. So let's picture it. He took an oil soif, shemitza dam l'malam. He did mitzvah on the blood of the oil upstairs, which is the correct location for the mitzvah of the oil soif, and he's claiming that it's a chatas, l'shem chatas soif. Tiratza, it should work. Why? Let's ignore what he's saying. It's clearly an oila. His actions are proclaiming that it's an oila. The oila sa'ifi. Why? The chata sa'ifi. Because if it were to be a chatas, first of all, lamata v'avet, he would do it downstairs, location of the chatas, and also hazah, you do hazah, not mitzvah. Once again, says the Gemara, not so sure. Amri, the answer was given like this: Dilma mitzvah de basar hazah. Maybe it's really a chatas as he's claiming. And the reason why he's doing mitzvah is because he already did the hazah. And the mitzvah, which is phase 2 of the chatas, can be done anywhere. The basar hazah, the Amar as we learned, mitzvah dama b'chol makom mizbeach shera. The mitzvah of a chatas oif can be done anywhere in the mizbeach, so you'll never know if it's really a chatas or an oila. So his Shaloi Lishma has to be taken into account. Next case, chatas oif. She's a dama lamata l'shem oila soif. He took a chatas bird and did the hazah, which is unique, exclusive to a chatas, on the bottom part of the mizbeach, claiming that it's an Oila Soif. I'm doing this for the sake of Oila Soif. Tiratza, let it work. Let us ignore what he's saying. Let the Chatas be perfectly fine. Once again, his actions are screaming at us that there are Chatas. Because otherwise he wouldn't be doing it here, and he would not be doing Hazah. Because it was really an Oila. First of all, they would do it on the upper part of the Mizbeach, and secondly, he would not be doing Hazah. He would be doing Mitzvah. Says the Gemara, you're right. You're right on this one, Achanami. In this case, you're right. Because his deviant thought are plainly contradicted by the facts. So it's one exception, together with all the Menachos, which are always contradicted by the facts on the ground. So Rav Shimon said that a Shalei Lishma by Mincha is just discounted because Menachos are different than Zvachim. He meant different than animal karbanos. Because by animals you can't really tell them apart. Their processes aren't so distinct and you can't. But by birds you've come up with a case. You're right. In this case, it would follow the same track as Menachos, and you could just ignore his incorrect intentions. Ella rather lefisha in Menachos demis l'zvachim kamar. In fact, Reb Shimon contrasted Menachos, where we ignore the Shlei Lishma because it says it's different than animal karbanos, where it's all one family. Kamar. That's how he said it. L'zvachim b'lei lo'ifas, but he specifically referred to animal karbanos, where it's hard to tell them apart. B'lei lo'ifas, but he didn't compare it to contrast it to birds, because by birds you're right. You could find a case where we could just discount the Shlei Lishma due to the fact that it's contradicted by the facts on the ground. Okay, let's do a quick chazar of today's daf. Just like by Zvachim, there are 3 phases to the Avodah. Likewise, by a Mincha, we have Kmitza, Nesina Bakli, Halacha, and Aktorah. Just like by the Zvachim, ideally you meant to do it Lishma, having the right carbon in mind, the right owner in mind. Same with Menachos. But if not, if there was Shalei Lishma here, what happens? By the Minchas Choyte, Minchas Knois, a totally puzzle. Otherwise, the Minchas Kosher, the owner the owner has to redo it. And furthermore, we learned that the carbon is kosher to the point that you must conclude the process properly. There's no license for continued deviation. Now, what about Rav Shimon's shita? Shimon says that by a mincha we ignore the Shlei Lishma because Maaseh Moichichen, right? The actions, the actual process contradicts it. So you can just ignore what he's saying. How does that work with our Mishnah? So we did have one way to reconcile our Mishnah with Rav Shimon, because even Rav Shimon would agree when he verbalizes the word mincha that it's different, and our Mishnah is speaking about such a case. But otherwise, according to the other ways of understanding Rav Shimon, it would not work with the Mishnah, which reckons with Shlei Lishma by a mincha, versus Rav Shimon who says, look, if it's clearly otherwise, I could just ignore what he's doing and what he's saying. That applies to Menachos, and at least in one case, to birds as well. All the best to you, and Hatzlacha.